Just got back from Cursive and Thursday tour. How was it?
Oh, it was good, man. I'm totally stoked to be back home, but it was all totally manageable despite we had like a lot of strange yeah, I don't know. Like we had our bus broke down at one point. That was wild.
Wow.
A show got canceled because of a blizzard. Like and and had to drive through a second blizzard. It was just weird. I tour through January and February often, and now I feel like maybe my luck has dried out, has ran out.
Gotcha. Yeah, those aren't even the typical run of the mill pandemic cancellations.
No, that was what's kind of funny about it is that we none of us got COVID. The whole concern about the tour was COVID, but we are actually quite careful the entire time. So
Beautiful. Well, cool. I'm gonna ask you about your new solo record that's coming in a little bit, but let's go way back for the
yeah,
purposes of this right now. It's
sure.
really funny. It's really funny because I recently watched the Spend an Evening with Saddle Creek thing, and
Oh yeah.
obviously a whole bunch follows up this period of time in the late 90s and everything. Clearly something was happening in that place, and I have some more questions about it, but how do you feel about those early Cursive records?
Well, I don't want to pat myself on the back here, but I feel good about the Cursive records. I mean, I probably feel good about my whole kind of mission to start yet another band. When I started Cursive was kind of like, well, why don't you start taking it seriously for once, you dumb piece of shit, and like make music that you're not going to be embarrassed of,
Yeah.
later. And so I feel comfortable with the Cursive catalog, but I can't say that is about like Slow Down Virginia and a lot of stuff back then, I guess.
Yeah, it seemed like maybe at that time, I mean, it's not me to put this on you, but I mean, you moved to Portland for a period, right? And then
Yeah.
you're back. Is it when you came back from Portland that mindset shift happened?
It was prior to that. We had done two Cursive records at that point. Those two Cursive records though the third one was Domestica, and there really was kind of there was certainly like a shift,
Yeah.
just kind of like a overall approach. And I don't really know how or why that happened, other than maybe I just kind of just needed to get just a little bit older for me or something. I needed to kind of wisen up a little bit more as far as songwriting goes. But again, that doesn't suggest that I don't dislike those first two. They have a different feel, almost not really a different band, but maybe a different band, kind of a
Yeah,
different
yeah.
band.
I mean, it seems like Cursive really, and I'd say Bright Eyes as well. Like there was a very conscious, not do the same thing over and over type thing as you follow it from letting off the happiness to Fevers and Mirrors to Lifted. It's like kind of
Mhm.
can draw some parallel. I mean, me as an outsider, it's a different kind of music, really, but like Domestica to Ugly Organ and stuff.
Yeah.
Jenny's in the garage. She's got the car in neutral. She rolls it out so quietly. It's Saturday as usual. It always is.
All right, so I'm gonna try and I hope I don't fuck this up, but I heard there's this is about kind of like Saddle Creek and Omaha. I've never been to Omaha. Apologies if I speak ignorantly about it at all in this, but I remember someone talking about like it seems a little antithetical that like if you started an antique store in some town, that if an antique store opened across the street from it, it would take half your business. It would whatever. It would not be good for your business because now there are two of them.
Mhm.
But what they kind of go on to talk about is like if you have one antique store in a town, no, it is what it is, and it's not a destination for anybody. But then all of a sudden you have 5, 6 of them. Now there's like that becomes what this town is, and now there's like a feeding energy that comes off of that. And so like you can read a ton about like music scenes out of LA and New York and even Seattle, but like those bands were all from different areas of the Pacific Northwest or Washington D.C. with like Minor Threat and all that. Something about the thing that happens in Omaha in the late 90s with Saddle Creek is like the bands don't necessarily sound the same. It's not a place that it feels like I mean, you only know your own experience, but I'm trying to understand Omaha at that time and everything that came out of it.
Well, firstly, I very much am a proponent of the more antique stores, the better. It's something that I think is talked about often. We have a couple, myself and the other gentleman in Cursive, we have couple bars in Omaha, and I'm always a fan of like, because they're both of our bars kind of just sit off a little off, and one's like way off in the cut, and the other one's just kind of like a little locked off to the side. And if we had more bars around them, then you'd have a scene.
Yeah,
that's like what you call, it'd be like you'd have like a corridor of bars, and I think it just brings more people, actually, not less. And yeah, you're right. If there was if it would have been just Bright Eyes or just the Faint, there wouldn't have been like a story there, or the story would have been like more of a footnote, like they happen to be from Omaha, Nebraska. Can you believe that? But to have like a slew of bands from there, I think was kind of that definitely made the story. There wasn't a lot of a discussion amongst ourselves, between us all, about like, you're Conor, you're doing folk stuff, so we have to go over here and do, like that's already taken. We didn't really talk about it, but I do think that it was all kind of there's a lot of like silent implication of or you know what, or how about maybe the bands talked about it within their own little circle. Uh-oh, this is turning into a horror movie as your door is opening behind you.
That's either a cat or a dog with something's pushing up against it. Oh yeah, dog.
I don't know.
She
it's
made
a small person with a knife.
Yeah, she.
I think that I use the Faint as perhaps the best example of it, just because they took such a hard left from what we were doing, and I think that was so cool. And I imagine that they probably talked within their own party about like, like Bright Eyes is doing this folk stuff and Chris is already doing this hard rock stuff, and we all wanted to write with one another, like write alongside one another, but we didn't want to rip one another off more than we already felt like we were.
It's incredible, really, though, because like you talk about like having all those bars down and like that's how you get a scene or make it a place to go to, but it's almost like being like, okay, this scene has a dive bar, like high-end club, it's not like one of these scenes where it's like, oh yeah, a bunch of skate punk came out of San Diego in like the mid 90s or whatever. It's all of a piece, and there's really some kind of like artistic exploration or something, like a thread that binds it, really. But what the Faint does and what Bright Eyes does is such a different thing.
Well, here's the thought. I don't think I've really this kind of just popped in my head because you're kind of using that bar analogy. We really were born of like eclecticism was like pretty important, like really early on, and I wonder if that I bet that kind of stuck around. It was important. It was important to us to not homogenize what we were doing, and I bet that kind of like inadvertently created Cursive and in the Faint. Those two styles were a little bit more like outlier for us, because mostly, I should mention Lullaby for Working Class as well, because they were doing something different from all of us too. They were like, let's use like all of these like acoustic instruments in like a vast, like let's litter our liner notes with like all of these different instruments that people are generally unfamiliar with, especially in indie rock. But anyway, yeah, that's what we were born of, is indie rock. Absolutely. Right. I mean, we were born of, Archers of Loaf and Spoon, and but then also Fugazi, and just all kinds of stuff, Superchunk. But
yeah, I mean, that really feels like, when I'm saying that there's like a thread that binds it, that's what feels like there is, and like what you just mentioned about Lullaby for the Working Class, you see those. I mean, the sound the Faint does, and then the cello coming into Cursive, and then you catch these kind of things all over Bright Eyes. It's like, what is that instrument? Why is that there? It's cool, yeah. It's a deliberate choice.
Tell me what you wanted to hear. Let me do the right thing. Let me do the wrong thing. If it's ever this clear, I'll only say it once. Just let me turn the amps way so you can hear.
I saw a thing where it's like, it was called Lumberjack Records, and it was like, oh no, there's a distributor called that. We got to change it to Saddle Creek. And when they and so it's like, they got to change it. I think the way it was referenced was like, so everyone got together and then like agreed on Saddle Creek. Like, to me, it's funny for me to try and envision what all of us getting together and agreeing on it being Saddle Creek is. Like, all right, A Faint, Lullaby for Working Class, Bright Eyes, all of us come together. Let's like, how does that look? You know, how connected and how often are these people seeing each other? How formal is a thing like that at that time?
Probably not incredibly formal.
And I guess not formal, but like, how are you arriving at a decision like that? It's me trying to like see that world. It's just a funny thing to envision.
Yeah, I mean, I vaguely remember. I think it was just probably just like I don't remember so much, and maybe others do, but I don't remember a sit down, meeting of like, hear ye, what is the new name? We can no longer use lumberjack. But I do remember it just being like an important conversation that kept being passed around to everybody, and then it, again, to my memory, I feel like I would credit, and you probably know all of this better because you just watched that documentary, but I would credit it to Ted Stevens. His point being that Saddle Creek was the road that he would always take to get up to the Oberst house, which was one of the, that was one of the main hangs that we all had, was Matt, Conor, and Justin is their parents' house.
Yeah.
And they lived next door to Bart Volkmer, and Bart Volkmer was part of our scene too. He was in Smash Mouth, if you're familiar, as our Steve Peterson and Clint and Bart's band before Smash Mouth.
Yeah.
they had the name first. They were a great band. And so that was just, I kind of remember that just being floated around, and like, to me, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. That's it was just kind of like picking a name, but we wanted it also to be something that meant something to us. And Saddle Creek is a through way to where a lot of us were living at the time.
Beautiful. Is it also a creek or just a road?
Yeah, I guess so. Like, I think that it was. I think, or maybe it was.
It died in the Dust Bowl.
Yeah, it's definitely. It's definitely a floodplain of sorts. I know that specifically because one of the bars that we have is right on Saddle Creek. It gets flooded the shit out of it. It's
wow.
It's just awful. Yeah, so it's kind of in between. It's like it's a creek. It's all a street. There's no creek there anymore. But I mean, maybe like 100 years ago there was.
Yeah. Well, it's beautifully authentic and intriguing, and it like adds to the like. I can envision this place where these guys are. This is all coming from. All right. So you mentioned, good.
No, I was just gonna say that helps me recall it. There were some issues, before we finally decided on the name, there was like those hiccups were kind of things like saddle. You don't have like word saddle in there, it's kind of it's kind of connotes, something kind of more country Western, and
yeah.
But yeah, because it's just I wonder what Saddle Creek looks, how people envision it. Like the way you mentioned it is funny because for us it's like absolutely it's just a road.
Yeah, totally. All right, so you mentioned take that road up to the Oberst house. You mentioned driving up that road, and these guys were in these bands and a part of this whole scene. Those siblings. So you, Mogus, Todd Fink, all born in 1974. Conor Oberst born in 1980. There's a quote from Mike Mogus saying like, I started hearing these songs. It's like, damn, this kid's pretty intense. It's like he's 14 years old. Like, what is the perception of this kid playing these songs? Because you guys like Cursive like had traction and stuff. Like there was stuff happening. You guys were a little older. Like, it's fascinating to me to think about like, wow, what's that kid up to?
I had a beautiful, beautiful time. The drives and the talks were amazing. The kind of friend I thought I'd never find. I had a beautiful, beautiful time.
It didn't take us too long to kind of buoy him up as a peer. a peer to all of us. I do remember that transition because, I mean, for one, I grew up with Maddie, his older brother,
Yeah.
and played in bands with Maddie. So Conor was absolutely a younger brother for, that a lot of those early years. But he just kind of he grew fast, and he grew up fast. And a lot of that, I think he attests to this as well, is that he grew up with us, like he grew up with older kids. Both him and Justin were just like funny kids. They're just funny guys. And we just, they kind of wanted to hang out, and we kind of kept letting them hang out. And so Conor just kind of grew up fast, and had a lot of, and as everyone heard, kind of had a lot of clever ideas early on. And I'll attribute Ted Stevens yet again. Ted has like so much to do with so much of this. I feel like that documentary gets it wrong a little bit, and they kind of like attribute me to so much of it. I think that people just kind of liked what I was doing with Slow Down, but Ted had so much to do with really kind of keeping it all together, giving everything direction, I think,
Yeah.
So he saw something in Conor more than anybody else did, it seemed like, and he really championed Conor at such an early age, and that was cool. And I think that maybe possibly more than most anyone, that's maybe one of the most important influences for Conor.
Nice.
Because Ted gave him so much of that confidence to just like, these like record these, got to get these songs down on tape, and like, let's put them out. And
I like the way you put that he saw something in him, because it's like, you at that time, like those collection of songs, 95 to 97, like 4-track basement recordings, like you do gotta, for a lot of it, you do gotta kind of see, it's pretty rough, you gotta find the potential in there, but you listen and it's there. It's like, shit, man, there's something this kid's doing. He's doing something, and to be that young, it's just wild.
Yeah. And I'll confess to didn't see it the way that he did either, but I certainly didn't dislike. I certainly liked it, but I liked it probably much more the way that you like your friends' music. Like your good buddies recording stuff, and like I took it seriously, and I enjoyed it. But I didn't really quite see it. I didn't quite see what Ted was saying initially. But
yeah. Hang on, I got a cat now going crazy. 1 second.
Restrictions of time and space retire while her bright eyes burn through my exploding heart.
Obviously, any little change in anybody's life determines how things play out differently, but to be that young kid with this like essentially indie rock infrastructure around you, there's a place to channel it. That's all there. That seems that I have to imagine that plays a big role in, like, by the time you're 20 years old, you're making Fevers and Mirrors, you're not just like, I like playing songs. What do I do with this? Where do I go with this?
He was astute. He was very clever back then. Again, he was 6 years I was 6 years his senior, but I didn't have any, when I was 20, I was hanging out with a 14-year-old all the time.
Yeah.
And it didn't seem weird to any of us, because both him and Justin were they're just intelligent, clever, witty, astute kids,
Yeah.
that we just had to like not let them drink alcohol or smoke weed.
Nice. I like they're like referencing back to like they were funny kids, they were cool, funny kids. And it's like, in the moment, take yourself back to the moment when these records are being like, Bright Eyes is being introduced to the world. The idea of this as a funny kid is not at all. It's very, very sad, trembling emo boy who's talking about his mom drowning babies in a bathtub.
Yeah, but he really was. He was, and he was hilarious.
I had a brother once. He drowned in a bathtub before he'd ever learned how to talk. And I don't know what his name was, but my mother does. I heard her say it once, Patrick, my prince.
I think you get that now. So like I came to Bright Eyes and Cursive, if I'm totally like honest with it, at lifted and Ugly Organ, and then went back. And it's like a beautiful gift when you have that ability to do that. And around that time I was like in college, and I was sorting out like what's emo. Like I don't totally get this. Like I didn't have a lot of like vocabulary for that before, but I don't know if that, and maybe it doesn't even matter, but like was that word used around like Bright Eyes and Cursive in that scene? Was it? I'm fascinated with the idea of what like emo seemed like it was taking shape and like kind of couldn't be defined at that time, and wondering what you feel about that. Before we get to Tim's late 90s emo scene report, I want to invite you to subscribe to the After the Deluge Patreon. If you subscribe over at patreon.com/afterthedeluge, you get bonus content on every episode and no ads, plus occasional episodes that you won't find in your normal feed. You will also get a zine. That's a DIY magazine made by me, all about this season of the show, mailed directly to your home. I've immersed myself into some podcast series in the past, but then kind of when you finish, it's just sort of gone. This like thing you can hold in your hands and pick up and revisit, it's cool. I made one for the Jackson Browne series, and I love that it exists. And if you listen to this Bright Eye series, I think you will too, and I will be very excited to go down to my local post office and send you one. There's a link in the show description, and now let's talk emo with Tim Kasher.
God, I don't know if I can pinpoint a year when I first heard the word, but we got to I feel like we got to enjoy maybe at least a few pristine years of virginal years of not being aware of what the word emo was. Yeah, I kind of remember hearing the words like when Cursive would start kind of doing fledgling tours in the late 90s, maybe like 97, 98, I guess. Yeah. Does that seem right? When did people start overusing that word?
I talked about this on the Fevers and Mirrors one, but a friend who was like talking about emo was like gave me a burned CD, Fevers and Mirrors, that I didn't listen to because she was talking to me all the time about this thing called emo. And I think I was some combination of being like, I like a lot of old emotional folk music and like songs like singer-songwriter music, but who emotional music has existed forever. And also I like punk music, and that just seems like the lamer version of that. This is all self-criticism on myself, But so that was probably like 2000, and I think by the time I was like aware and like had a grip on it, it was like 2001 or something. But I think that was happening in the late 90s for sure. That's like that's me arriving to it late.
Yeah, well, and we were just, we were like perplexed by it when we heard it, and then just had to spend years defending not the word emo, but defending what we were doing. And I would often use kind of what you were saying. I would be like, do we discredit Leonard Cohen? Is that what we're doing? No. Yeah. It's like, what are we doing here? Are we saying that nobody should write? I mean, are we going to just discredit like all of the great writers through history who wrote, like emotionally like charged biographies? I mean, it seemed like a weird. It seemed very anti-art to me.
Yeah, this word as a descriptor of something that differentiates this music from something else. It's like that's one of the backbones of music and songwriting forever. Well, so something when you listen to like those first two Bright Eyes records, one of which is just a collection of stuff, and then one of which is like getting a little bit more toward like consciously making a record with letting off the happiness, you get this like I always enjoy the kind of period when you listen to like Bleach, like Nirvana Bleach, and you hear the whole thing and it's a lot of noise and stuff. It's a cool and interesting sound, but then you hear like About a Girl and you're kind of like, that's like that's like a different thing. That's a person either letting themselves write a pop song or that's someone learning how to write a pop song or whatever. But sure, you get that in these, like you get Falling Out of Love at This Volume and June on the West Coast. And do those feel like, do you have any recollection? And I told you I wouldn't like hit you with on the spot specific stuff like this, but any recollection of like, that's a different thing that's a person using this. They jump out on those records.
Letting Off the Happiness was like a big leap forward for like all of us. I'll say that as we were very much working as a collective at that point, we all got really excited about everyone's records. We were always like super supportive of everyone's records. And I remember Letting Out the Happiness came out. I want to say it kind of came out around the same time as Cursive Storms of Early Summer.
Yeah.
And And it was monumental. It was really monumental because prior to that, it was the collection of songs, which was very bedroom hodgepodge, and good stuff and whatnot. Uh, but at that point, Conor was still kind of like, I mean, I was doing Commander Venus with him, and that was Commander Venus was his Cursive and his Faint.
Yeah.
So Bright Eyes was other. It was his, like, I also am doing stuff on my 8-track. And so when Letting Out the Happiness came out, that was like, oh wow, this is great. He's like going like full bore with Bright Eyes.
I dreamt of a fever, one that would cure me of this cold winter set heart, with heat to melt these frozen tears, burned with reasons as to carry on. Into these twisted months I plunge without a light to follow, but I swear that I would follow anything, just get me out of here. But you get 6 months to adapt.
Yeah, that was a pretty monumental shift.
I mean, there's like something really, the idea that you're all coming together, as you're calling it, a collective, to like lift everybody else's thing up. Like, it seems like maybe that the existence of a thing like that now is maybe cordoned off to the internet. I mean, especially during the pandemic, like it's hard for me to imagine. Sure. I mean, I don't know, like I'm aging person. I'm in middling age, but I don't know. It's hard to, it seems unique even in that time, whatever you guys had happening, but it seems like it'd be extra unique now.
This is probably just gets into like dull conversation, or maybe dull to me because it's like talked about it so much, but Omaha, I think, has a lot to do with it. I think that just, placing, I think you're going to be much more likely to find something like this, like in Cheyenne, Wyoming, or something, where there's just like not a lot of scene to be spoken for. And that, I think that was really to our benefit, like we were like a group of kids who all kind of like got obsessed with music and with playing and writing music. There wasn't a ton of other things going on. And also we recognized full well that we had to do it ourselves. There was like, in Omaha, there weren't avenues out, or,
Yeah.
and that's, and maybe there was some pre-internet benefit to that, or as you're suggesting, maybe the internet, maybe this can happen more often with the internet. I don't know. I'm also middling aged, I suppose, as far as not understanding how the internet really works with youngsters these days.
Yeah. So it's sort of like there's not a scene unless we make a scene in this place. And then,
well, and we were so insular, I guess. It's like, that was, I don't know, something about all of that kind of like, we didn't really realize, well, we didn't even know what to compare ourselves to, but I do think that there's a lot of benefit to us being kind of way out there in the middle of nowhere, and then being like, we can only help each other,
And I visited my brother on the outskirts of Olympia, where the forest and the water become one. And we talked about our childhood like a dream we were convinced of, the perfect peaceful street that we came from. And I know he heard me strumming all those sad and simple chords as I sat inside my room so long ago. And it hurts that he's still shaking from those secrets that were told by a car closed up too tight and the heart turned cold.
what was there? I mean, when you're at that kind of early phase of like starting band or playing music, there's a lot of shows, especially in like indie and punk scenes, where the audience is essentially like a handful of people and the people in the other bands. Like, how much of like those early shows and like those early Saddle Creek shows and stuff like that were like, was there a good amount of people in Omaha that were just like people who came out to watch these shows, like part of that scene, but just as not people who played in Saddle Creek bands, but just people who liked that music and wanted to go see it?
We really were pretty much our own fans for a lot of that. I'd say I think maybe all of the 90s, like we were all pretty much like shitty bands who only went out and saw each other. And there was, to be in deference of like the smattering of kids who came out. There was a very, very small scene of people who supported and came out to shows and helped out. But it's mostly house shows, and we play Cog Factory. And I do remember the first handful of years of touring. There was, I think that we all had similar stories of like, yeah, it was this, you were playing to 200 people in New York and 30 people in our hometown,
Yeah.
Like people were starting to get to know us everywhere except for Omaha. It felt like for a little while there, but Omaha came around, and mostly due because of, it's kind of fucking sucks that way, but it's like we got national attention, and then Omaha was like, what?
Yeah. That's funny. I'm reading this Dan Ozzie Sellout book right now.
Yeah, I
I've
read
heard about
that.
the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really great. It's funny. It's funny. Like those first few chapters are like Green Day signs, blows up, Jawbreaker signs, it goes poorly. I think Blink-182 is there. And then you get Jimmy Eat World from Tucson or Tempe, Arizona. And it's just like similar thing, but even fewer bands to play with and stuff. Like they're exchanging emails with like guys in Colorado and stuff. And then they sign, and it's just the people in Arizona, like, the boys made it. Like the boys made it out. Like none of the baggage, none of the like, it seems like something unique to the size of town and the removed from the main places or something.
I felt that way about the Jimmy Eat World chapter as well. It feels different than the others. There's drama to be found in that chapter, but had nothing to do with like the early scene.
Yeah. The whole idea of the word sellout is like all the baggage that comes with it, and does this compromise things, does this blah blah blah, and it was like, we don't even have fans. We don't have fans to piss off yet. It's just some guy heard our demo and could tell we could make a melody, and they were right. I'm excited. There's a Thursday chapter, right? I'm not there yet, but I'm excited to get there.
Contrast and compare between the busy ones and the ones who don't care, until there is no one that you really know. So I drift through these days.
All right. So you talked a lot about the sort of like exploratory nature of these bands on Saddle Creek, kind of like an artistic bent to try new things. You strike me as someone, I do some writing for The Hard Times, the satirical punk magazine, and those guys actually connected me with you, and I thank them for that. But you were talking to them. I mean, you've made a movie, you have The Good Life, you have Cursive, you've made solo records, you have a solo record coming out. Quick note, Tim's album is out now, and you're going to hear some of it at the end of this episode. Can you tell me a little bit about that? It seems like a constant itch to be doing other new things, maybe.
I think that's kind of it, just what it is. I think that there's some like mental health to it as well. I get kind of I think that constantly working on things kind of helps keep like the devil away. I just I get kind of depressed if I'm not working on stuff, and I just get really excited about it. I'm fortunate enough that I get to just fill my docket with these kind of selfishly grand notions.
Cool. It's inspiring. I mean, the idea that like you writing a Cursive song, you writing a Good Life song, you writing a Tim Kasher song, like this can also ask you this question, but I've thought about it in terms of Bright Eyes as well. You have a solo artist, you have a band, you have a Better Oblivion Community Center and Mystic Valley band. Like, do you occupy a different space? Do you know what you're writing when you're writing? Do you find that along the way? Is it some combination of all of that?
I kind of have a different mindset, I suppose, and maybe a different frame of references and of influences, I suppose, if I'm writing for different things, for different projects. But I also kind of start if I'm lucky, I'll have an idea for the album before I get started, and that will kind of help steer the ship. Sometimes that's not the case though, and so I have to just kind of work on like, okay, this is just generally a solo record, and so I just have to kind of like wait and see where that leads, But yeah, there's also I've learned over the years that you're writing for your band, so if I'm writing a good life record, I'm thinking about, I know that the tastes and the qualities and the flavors that Steph and Ryan and Roger like, and I kind of want to appease them. I want to appeal to them and get them excited about it. And it's obviously same with Cursive. What's unusual and what's kind of feels like the feeling like alone on an deserted on an island is doing this solo records. It's like I don't really have a sounding board for that, but I also think that's good too. I think it's just a different approach that I kind of try to embrace that in that way as well. My problem is I think I'm a terrible I don't think I'm a terrible editor, but I'm terrible at knowing the quality of my own work. And so with my solo stuff, I don't have without a sounding board. I don't really have people being like, you don't hear that, like this song that you're scrapping over here is your best song, and I don't know. I don't like that one as much as these like dour ones,
I don't think you're alone in that. And I think also good on you though for being open to that kind of conversation when you're doing collaborative stuff, because I think there's plenty of people who struggle with even hearing that kind of thing, regardless of what they're making.
Yeah, I think that you should embrace. One should embrace the benefits of working with a group.
Yeah,
like that should be hopefully that should be the point. Is getting constructive feedback.
I love it. All right, well that draws a line perfectly to you have a solo record coming out. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's called Middling Age. It's as many of us have had strange experiences through the pandemic now. I won't be so dull and obtuse as to say it's a pandemic record, because it's not. I actually wrote a lot of it before the pandemic started, but that's what's strange about it. That's the strange experience for me, is that I opted to hold on to this record because I couldn't really let go of the record during the pandemic, knowing that I would never be able to tour for it. I just felt like it was such a disservice for this record that every record I do, you work really hard on it and you're like proud of it and you want to get it to as many people as possible. And I felt like without having any outlet to be able to go to everyone's respective towns and kind of like show up and be like, hey, I have a new record, without being able to do that, I just hated the feeling of it. And I'm just, especially with my solo stuff, I'm just such a smaller artist. And I thought it would just totally die on the internet vine if I were to release it during the pandemic. So
that's cool. That's a good way to put that. Cause like, I think there's an easy way to see it the opposite and be like, oh, there's a pandemic, I'm just going to make a thing by myself and put that out there. But like, I get what you're saying. And I don't know if these words were yours or Rolling Stones, but an existentialist screed on mortality and loss that has inadvertently arrived as the world struggles in kind. Interesting. Like, all right, pandemic. Yeah. Right. We have 2-year pandemic, but actually like last winter, this is me venting my own, middling age existential shit, I guess. But last winter I had like a knee injury, and I live in the Pacific Northwest. It's dark, it's rainy, it's cold. Long recovery, whereas I felt like I just bounced back from every injury I ever had prior to that. And then like I came out of that period of time like taking vitamins and doing yoga and like just sort of like it's like mortality seems way too dramatic for the word for it, but it's sort of like a kind of a sprawling effect that probably has something to do with the pandemic. I think kind of getting at what you're talking about. It's like that's all happening, but it's not happening in absence of a weird different world,
Sure, totally. And yeah, it doesn't surprise me that a record that I would write would end up kind of reflecting a pandemic existentialist feel anyway. And I did continue to write again because I was sitting on the record, and so I did continue to write into the pandemic. So I think there are at least one song in particular, but maybe like a couple songs that are kind of definitely like a couple songs that are kind of pandemic songs, just in the sense that I was writing so much stuff, and then I would come back to this Middling Age record and be like, well, I'm still not going to release this yet. And so I kind of got to a point where it's like, you should just write another batch of songs and see if you can outwrite what you already have. And did end up with like a couple more songs as a result. But it's all just strange for me. I really do like to just kind of like, I like to keep hurtling forward, and I like to release. I don't know if the public needs it, but I like to release a record every year just because that's what I do. It's just I'm mostly writing, and so it was strange. It was strange to have like 2 years. So I guess the last record I released was Cursive's Get Fixed in 2019. So yeah, to me, for my own like vanity, I have, the pandemic has given me like a 2-year hole of 2020 and 2021 where I didn't release anything, but yeah, that's fine.
The shower has a window overlooking city streets. You'd glower at the rush hour on hungover mornings. I'd post up on the toilet just to keep you company. I don't think about you all the time. I don't think about you all the time. I don't think about you all the time.
Well, thank you so much for talking. I feel like there's anything that you wanted to say that I didn't ask you about.
No, this is great, and I really wish you luck with all this. I think it's a cool project.
Thanks so much. I will accept that energy and go forward with it. Awesome. Where can people find you and things you make?
I think for a middling age, for the new record, it's out on 15 Passenger Records, which I think is 15passenger.com if I'm correct. That's probably the best spot. That's all solo stuff and cursive stuff. And
Tim, thank you again. I appreciate it. I know you're just fresh off tour. You got a record coming out, plenty going on, and
hell yeah.
Go to patreon.com/afterthedeluge if you want the cool deluxe version of this show. And thanks for listening. Fevers and Mirrors next week.
And there's a boy in a basement with a 4-track machine. He's been strumming and screaming all night down there. The tape hits will cover